Ready?
Yep.
Going live.
Hey y'all, I'm James Wright. Welcome to my shop, and it is time for another live, and it is time for our monthly Q&A. So if you have any questions, throw those down in the chat. We'll get to as many of them as we can. And if you are watching this recorded, then if you go down in the description, there is a list of all the questions that have been asked and answered, as well as timestamps that will move you generally close to them. So if you want to see that, it makes it a little easier to read through the questions and see what you want answered. Now, just be warned, I still haven't had a chance to fully rebuild the computer, so we're still going on this. I fixed up a few things, and it should last the whole live, but we'll see. I just sunk a rather significant chunk of change into whole new parts, but they have to come in for a while, so hopefully it'll be rebuilt for next week. And that's the reason last week's video cut out after like 12 minutes. So hopefully we'll finish that video next week. But yes. Any other things I have to go into before? Okay, before we jump into anything else, I have this. On Wood by Wright, we had a Secret Santa for everyone in the Hive Mind and on Patreon. And so this is actually my Secret Santa gift, so I figured I would open it up here. I don't know who sent it to me, although I can probably look at it. Oh, it's from Pratt and Miller Engineering. So I have no idea who sent this to me. Hopefully there's a sign inside. I could go and look at the list, but I purposely have not, to keep it Secret Santa. So I actually have my gift I just finished yesterday, so sorry for whoever I have, but you're getting yours too soon. Oh, there is a letter in here. So, I picked off your Amazon list. Read it? I picked off your Amazon list. Oh, someone actually listens to my Amazon list. This is one of the most amazing. I have a detailed Amazon list of everything I've ever wanted.
Oh, cry me.
People don't buy me off of my Amazon list, so thank you. And added a hand-carved gift for you. Oh, and or your wife. I love watching your YouTube channel and keep up the great videos. Thank you. Daryl. Thank you, Daryl. Daryl. I'm trying to remember the last name. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'll look it up. So let's see what we got. Packing supplies. I actually like packing supplies because if you buy from my store, one of you will get one of these air bubbles.
Full of enough air.
Let's see what out here. Oh! It is that. This has actually been on my Amazon wish list for over 6 years, and no one's gotten it for me. So this is a marking gauge. I know you can never have enough marking gauges, but this one is not 6 years. This one's been on there for probably 3 or 4 years. I've had several very similar to it since then. But this one is actually a micro adjustable from Tay Tools. And so it's got this middle wheel that separates the two out. And so what you can do is you get it close to where you want it to be, and you lock down this back screw, and then you can micro adjust it in and out, and then lock the front screw down to get it exactly where you want and lock it down on. That's really cool. Thanks, man.
Well, I'm glad I didn't buy that for you for Christmas.
Well, if you buy it off the Amazon list, it disappears so no one else can see it.
Oh, okay.
But then also, oh, cute. A little carved spoon. Really nice work, man. That is sharp.
So I can beat you.
My mother did break a few spoons on my backside. That is really nice. That is really clean work. Nice work, Daryl. So thank you. That was my my Christmas. So happy me. So let's get into answering questions. What do we got?
Hang on, I got a yawn.
Ooh, we've got a yawn first.
Oh. It's going to be a long night. I don't know why I'm so tired. All right. ZAG Studios. My hand plane controls get stiff when I lock the lever cap down. I don't even have it locked down tight. I'm pretty new to plane, so I'm not sure if this is normal or not. Is there any fix?
Every plane is going to be a little different. I have some. Well, I have with the new fine adjustment wheels from Tay Tools. It makes it much easier because every rotation is half of the movement, so you get more leverage force with the fine adjustment wheels. But what's the problem is every plane is a little bit different on how much force. If you put a lot of force down on that lever cap and you really crank it down, then this is going to be really, really stiff and hard to turn. Most people actually like it so that you can adjust it with a finger like this. And very few of my planes are actually smooth enough to do that. Most of them I have to get 2 fingers on here, or I have to stop and get both thumbs on and twist it that way. It's one of the things I like about the fine adjustment knobs, is that they're finer, so I get an easier control on the movement. I can do it with just the 1 finger. But as I said, every plane is going to be different. Some of them are going to be very stiff, and you have to stop and crank on them. I've got a couple of them where if it's tight enough for the blade not to move around, it means I have to actually hold it and use both hands to crank the knob down to the adjustment. So sometimes I'll loosen the pressure, adjust the knob, and then crank it back down. But most of them aren't quite that bad. But some of them are. So it really depends on your particular plane. But the goal is you want the lever cap tight enough so that when you're planing, the iron doesn't move around. And if you don't have a problem with that, then you might get away with loosening the lever cap just a little bit and try it again. And then you'll get to a point where, oh, suddenly it's skewing one way or the other as you move. That means you got to tighten it up a little bit more. Every plane is different, and it is not uncommon for it to be so tight that you have to stop and use both hands to adjust it when it's actually locked down to where it should be. So don't worry about it too much. But if you do want it smoother, you could always buy a Reed adjustment plane, adjustment tools, link down below.
Shameless plug.
No, I honestly, I had several people asking about that. I actually don't make that much from the Reed tools. One of my goals with that is I want to facilitate Jeff into making more things, because he has a bunch of really cool ideas. And he doesn't have anyone who can actually get the items to market. And so that's what I'm doing for him, is I want to see his ideas come to life. And so it's kind of my mission to help him with that. I make a little bit, but not much. Most of it is going to Jeff and getting him to actually get it up into it. And I want to actually see Reed planes come back someday. So I'm really looking forward to that. What's next?
Paul Chandler. When ripsawing to a line, my saw invariably drifts off. What should I be paying attention to?
Following a line is one of those things that it takes a lot of skill and a lot of patience, and there are a lot of body mechanics and things you can learn, but it's one of those things that you're going to have issues with it until one day it just suddenly clicks, and you're not quite sure what you did differently, but now it's working. Now, a couple things. If it's always turning off the same direction, you're always skewing the same direction, the problem is probably with your saw, and you should stone it. What happens is the saw is stoned.
Well, I was thinking like throwing stones.
Each of the teeth are bent over, so each tooth hangs out farther on one side or the other. And what happens is that's called set. And if you have too much set on one side or the other, the side with more set will cause it to cut farther onto that side. And so what you can do is take a sharpening stone and run it down the side that has too much. So if it's curving this way, then I want to stone this side. If it's curving this direction, then I want to stone this side and bring it back into true. But if it's going out different directions at different times, then it's you. And so there's a bunch of different things. Number one is the body mechanics. And I have a whole bunch of videos. If you want to watch it, I have, I think, like 4 or 5 videos on how do I saw straight or how do I follow a line. And the biggest thing is you want it to all be in line. You want the saw in line with your arm, in line with your upper arm, all the way to your shoulder. You want this whole motion to be perfectly in line. If you end up doing this, your saw is going to be going out. You see my hand is out over here, my shoulder's back here, I'm not in line with the saw. And a lot of times people are going one way or the other, kind of over-exaggerating it. But you want the whole thing to be right in line so that you can actually see your hand and your elbow. The best way to do that is to set up a camera, just like this. Set up a camera in line with you, in front, and then another one beside. Then you can actually see what you're doing and be like, wow, I didn't realize I do that. Most of the time it's your body gets in the way of the cut, and your arm has to get out here in order to make the cut happen. So you want to get your body out of the way and cut from that. The next thing is, you need to, when you see that it's getting off course, don't try and force the saw back onto course. That's going to cause you to overcorrect, and then suddenly you're going to be out this way, and then you're overcorrecting this way, and you're going to end up with this zigzag going back and forth. So as soon as you see yourself going out of course, back up to where you are good, twist the saw, use the side of the saw to scratch it back down, and correct your cut. If you can correct your cut, then you'll be getting a straight cut, and it'll also teach your hand that motor movement, motor control. And so don't try and fix the cut. Don't try and correct it. Back it up, and don't try and fix it at the bottom where it's off. Back up to where it's good, and then correct it from there. And that will give you a much cleaner stroke. After that, it's just learning your eye to the line and being able to see that, oh my, one stroke, from this stroke to this stroke, it went a little way this way. So the next stroke, I'm just going to apply a little bit of force back, and that brings it right back on track. And being able to see the difference from stroke to stroke to stroke and knowing exactly where the saw is, your body and brain will eventually get to the point where you can just follow that. But go watch the other videos on it. There's a lot more in those topics, and it's one of those that's just, you can see I get a little excited because it's really fun when someone actually gets it. The whole world of hand tools really comes to life once you can master one of these. So, sorry, I'm going to take a breath. What's next?
Yeah. I don't know what your children are doing upstairs, but it's very distracting.
Tap dancing.
Let's see. It doesn't matter how many threats you give. Kenny-Anjanette Horn asked, do you ever have any issues with using a BLO/paste waxed finish on white oak, leaving a white residue in the open grain?
If you're using most commercial waxes, yes, the wax itself is actually a little bit white. And so if it has a big pore for it to sit in, that white will, it becomes very, very obvious. Actually, on most of my waxes, they're not a white. They're almost an odd brown color, like this. And that makes them hide in the wood a little bit better. It's more of that cooked beeswax color. And it actually will disappear a little bit easier. Some of the commercial ones you'll actually get colored. You can get black waxes, and those tend to disappear really, really nicely. But yeah, it is the wax and the wood. And the only way to fix that is to polish it out. And that's not always easy with oaks because they have a really heavy open grain. But yeah, that's a common problem with a lot of paste wax. So what's next?
Let's see. Alex wants to know what contributes to the smoothness of hand plane adjustment. The flatness of frog and blade, ? Is lubrication needed / helps?
The smoothness of adjustment is, it's a whole list of things. It is the threads in between the depth adjuster and the stud. Over time, those tend to wear out or they get gunk in them. So you can back those all out and clean them and lubricate that thread. The flatness of the frog is fairly important, but not as much as you might think. And flattening it really isn't going to make it easier. If you really smooth it out and you get a really smooth, clean frog, you'll actually notice that it becomes harder to adjust because you have almost a suction between the iron and the frog. And so I like them to be actually pretty rough. The backs of my plane irons are flattened to like a 400 grit, except for right up at the tip, where I'm normally stropping them. Trying to think of what else is the big difference. Yeah, it usually just comes down to all the little things on the plane. And you can fiddle back and forth. I wouldn't lubricate between the iron and the frog. You want a decent amount of friction there. But most of the time, the things you can fix are the adjustment stud and wheel. The other common thing is that the frog, the fork that sticks into the adjustment knob, sometimes that needs to be cleaned up and actually will rub on the side. But yeah, that's the main thing. Some of them, there's just nothing you can do. They're old, they're worn out, and they're just going to be more difficult to run. But yeah, I mean, you can always buy new parts, but that's that.
Let's see. Jeremy Long said, I love the router plane builds. I was thinking about building a shoulder plane. Is that something you've done, or is it not a good idea? Yeah,
I actually did a video 4 or 5 years ago where I made a shoulder plane. It was actually a collaboration with Bearcat Woodworking. It was a lot of fun. Mine is like a low angle beveled down rabbet plane almost, but it works just as well with shoulders because the iron, rather than be at 45, is at like 35, 40, something like that. Actually, do I have that one in here? I do. Hey, this one. Yeah, this one. And so I made that one, which is a lot of fun. But that was, yeah, 4 or 5 years ago. I've also done, what is that called? The dovetail plane. It's molding plane style. I did that one in a live series. But actually, if you want to see one that looks a lot more like a standard shoulder plane, but with a wooden body, Bearcat Woodworking, when I made this one, he actually made one on a wood that looks very, very similar to a regular shoulder plane. So that would be a great resource to go look at his. But yeah, I think that's probably the closest I've come to what most people would consider a shoulder plane. So, what's next?
Let's see. Jonah asked, what is the best way to prevent rust on cast iron / steel tools?
Use them. The more you use them, the less rust you get. However, in some conditions and climates, you would have to use them every 3 or 4 hours. So that's not always easiest. You need to clog the pores of the steel and then actually seal the steel itself. And there are all sorts of different things. I actually have a test that I want to do here soon where I'm actually going to be trying, I think I have like 30 different rust preventers on there. And it's going to be an interesting one. And everyone is going to try different things. For me, in my climate and area, paste wax is all I need. It adds a little lubrication so things don't slide around. And that's really good. If you go down to Alabama, Georgia, Florida, that might not be enough, and you may need something more than that. And there are some specialty items. I'm trying to think of the one that really popped out. It was WD-40 Specialist, rust protector. WD-40 makes a line that they call Specialist, and it's not WD-40, it's actually something completely different. The company is WD-40, but then they make the Specialist of rust protecting, rust remover, and a couple others. But the rust protection actually worked out pretty well, though I do want to try a lot of others. A lot of people will swear by a water-based poly, putting a coat of that on there, and there's a bunch of other, try different things, see what works for you, and have some fun with it. But be warned, if you're in one of those climates, it's just something you've got to get a schedule, and that's probably the most important thing, is just have a schedule of, I need to apply it this often. For me, I go through all my tools about once a year, but being in an air-conditioned basement, that's not as much of an issue for me. What's next?
Warren Munn asked, what draw slides would you use for an architect-style cabinet where the drawers are going to need to carry a heavy weight?
I actually like wood-on-wood slides. I really, really do. A lot of people poo-poo them, and the amount of work you would have to do with them and the amount of daily use on the average drawer would have to be astronomical to wear out a wood-on-wood slide in 50, 60 years. You would have to be using it 20, 30 times a day. So for most drawers, I like to have it's just a wood piece that sticks out the side, and then you cut a notch into the side of your drawer that it slides on. And it works really, really well. If you want to see it, I recently did desk drawers, and I like that on there. After that, then you start getting into metal drawer slides, and there are all sorts of different ones on there. What are our kids doing?
I don't know. I think JJ came out of his room and riled Arthur up, who's supposed to be doing
I don't know if you guys can hear him. Yeah, and when it actually gets into metal drawer slides, I'm not the best to answer that because I rarely use them. I don't like metal drawer slides unless they get like a soft close. I like those, but those are really expensive. So for me, and almost all I do, it's a wood-on-wood drawer slide, and it's actually rather amazing how durable those are. So yeah, have a little bit of fun with it, but that's where I go. What's next?
Alex asked, how... Okay, hang on. How people did molding across the grain? What?
How do people do molding across the grain?
I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out. Are there any issues or same molding planes work and how thick the cut should be?
Yeah.
Okay,
like
that makes sense.
if you're talking about, here, let me grab a board. So we got a board here, and you have a molding, you'd want to go all the way around like a panel on a panel door. It's really easy to do it on this corner and this corner because those are going lengthwise with the grain. But if you want to do that same molding to continue down this side, you have to go across the grain on the end here. And in reality, use the exact same plane to do this as you do this. You're probably going to take a little bit lighter cut, so you might back off the iron a little bit. But the most important thing is the tear out, the split off. So as you come off the end and you exit it, you're going to be breaking off these fibers. So you need to have a sacrificial board over here. So I'd grab another board and clamp these two together, boom and boom. And so as I planed off one into the other, it would destroy this board, but it would keep this one safe. And I did a video on this just recently. I was just doing a bead. I don't remember what it was on. I think I was doing a picture frame or something like that. And the bead had to come off the end. You just put a scrap piece on the end, then line it up with what you're doing and run your molding plane right past it. But yes, you're going to need it sharp. You're going to be taking a little bit shallower cut, but any regular molding plane will do the trick. So the exact same one you use on the corner, use that on the end as well. What's next?
Let's see. The Art Addict asked, how do I get rid of heavy pitting on a chip breaker and blade from an old Stanley Type 11?
Grinding. Honestly, that's the answer. Now, the thing is, you have to understand where is pitting a problem and where is it not. Pitting on the flat surface of an iron, let me pull one out here. So, we're going to pull this out. Take it apart. So, on the iron here, I'm going to take this off, and if I have pitting, like this one actually has pitting up in here. That's not a problem. Pitting over here on the back, because I have the bevel on this side, any pitting on this side isn't going to matter at all in any way, shape, or form. If the pitting is on this side, on the flat side, I still have some pitting back here, and that's not a problem at all. But all of the pitting up at the edge is gone. It's a nice, smooth edge up there. And the only way you can do that is to grind it. Or, you know, like what I would do is really, really coarse sandpaper and just set it on the sandpaper and go to town and flatten it out. Get rid of that. Now with the chip breaker, like this one is just covered in pitting all over it. It's been cleaned out because of sandblasting. I mean, I still have some rust that's popped up around here. But at the actual edge, it's clean. There's no pitting right there. And that one, you're actually going to you want this to come to a point. You want this very edge to be just about as sharp as this. I mean, it's not going to be quite as sharp because it's a softer steel. But you want it that when these two mate together, you get a perfectly smooth transition from the iron to the chip breaker. If there's any pits right along that tip, that'll create a spot that a sliver gets underneath there and jams, and then you start to get clog up on it. If you want to see more on that particularly, I have a video on chip breaker problems and how to adjust and set up a chip breaker. And I go into that quite a decent amount of detail. But in most of the places on the chip breaker and iron, pitting really doesn't matter. Like on these ones, there's still quite a bit of pitting on this. Oh well. It really doesn't affect its function other than right on the tip of both. If you have it on the tip of the iron, then you're going to get scratches in your wood, lines on it. If you have the tips on the chip breaker, then you have problems on that. Sarah, can you turn off both knobs? Volume knobs? We're going to go quiet here for a second, guys. On the control, the audio panel. I'm going to broadcast. I had to broadcast on Google to try and quiet down the kids because they were getting unruly.
I'm about ready to go upstairs if I need to.
What's next?
Let's see. Ken Carlile said, how wide a kerf do you normally expect a carcass saw to cut? In your sliding dovetail live stream, you showed doing your cuts with one, but mine seems a rather rough cut.
It depends on how much set you have on it. Let's see. Mine is. What am I cutting? It is going to make about a.
I'll be right back.
What? 0.035. So that would be 3.5 hundredths.
What are you doing?
Yeah, 3.5 hundredths.
No.
Point.
We can hear everything. Stop it.
3.5. Yes, 3.5 hundredths. Wow, my brain's not working. I gotta love the English system. 0.035. So that's what my carcass saw is doing. Different saws throughout the ages have had different cuts. You get to some of the Japanese, like Japanese Zuki here. This one is a lot thinner. This one comes all the way down to 0.017. So a really, really thin cut on that one.
I just realized I forgot to turn my mic off.
Well, those of you watching got an interesting conversation. Ooh, Sarah put the work down on him. I got to go back and listen to that.
Edit that part out.
So, yeah. I hope that answers your question, but you're going to get some that are much, much thicker. Like my old Sheffield tenon saw. This one is really fat. This one is, come on, work out. 0.05. Really fat. But every saw is going to be a little different. So, hope that gives you some ideas. After that, what's next, babe?
Hoping
I have to put a timestamp on that one. Sarah yells at the kids.
Thankfully, I was kind of doing the mad mom whisper. Hashtag that. All moms know exactly. Let's see. Brendan Wells. Would you ever set up a frame saw to cut on the pull stroke? And how well do you think that would work?
It would work just as fine. Pull or push, you're going to get the exact same thing with it. The nice thing about being on the push stroke is it's much easier to get your body into it because you're falling forward. You can fall backwards, but you have a little less control. So in the end, it's a personal choice. I do know of a few people who have their massive frame saw on a pull stroke. Just what are you more comfortable with? And one of the nice things about it is a lot of the old ones where we had the knobs on the end. If you want it the other way, you just turn around and try the other way. Historically, things like that, some of the larger ones were designed to be run by two people. So one of them was pulling, and one of them was, well, they were both pulling, because you always, when you have two people working, you only work on the pull stroke. But the saw was only working for one of them, and the other one was just resetting it. So, but yeah, push or pull works perfectly fine, whichever way you want it to be. What's next?
Horns.
They're chatting about your...
Lend Sarah the wooden spoon.
Yes. Here, go threaten.
It was just like the most ridiculous reason why they were making noise, too. Like they've been silent until that moment. All right, Greg Elliot, what did he say? What size wooden thread did you use for your workbench repair? I am looking for a small thread box. Just looking for suggestions on the smallest size wooden threads you've seen being useful.
The one I have on this is a 1 inch. I have a 1/2 inch, a 3/4, a 1 inch, and an 1.5 inch. And I've used them all. I probably use the 1 inch more than anything else. I'd say that if you have to get one, get the 1 inch. What its thread count is, I don't know. It's the standard one on eBay. It's like $50 for both the box and tap. Not eBay, Amazon. I think Tay Tools also has them now. But yeah, 1 inch would be the one I would suggest. What's next?
Let's see. The Walnut Woodworker. Is a 10-inch long carcass saw useful?
Yeah, I mean the ones from PAX are, how long are these ones? Ones from PAX are 10 inches. So, okay. Brand new saw. It just comes down to personal likes. The English style tends to normally be a little bit shorter, so a 10-inch carcass saw would be perfectly common for them. Though they tend to be a little bit taller, they prefer a heftier saw than a lot of the American styles. I like them to be a little longer. Like mine is, I want to say it's 12 inches. It's 11 inches, so not that much more. But whatever you like, but 10 inches is perfectly fine. What's next?
Oh, we just got a question because I was like, we were caught up. Harold, it was strange. They're not as...
Well, we're actually keeping up with the questions tonight.
I know.
Wow. So yeah, people throw them in the chat. We'll be able to get to most of them.
Harold Golden asked, what is the bid up to on the Purple Heart saw, or is the auction over?
Oh yeah, no, I should have started with this earlier. The Purple Heart, I'm going to move out of the camera here. Now this is going to probably look blue or reddish in the camera. Just understand both of these are the exact same purple color. Let's see, does that look purple on the screen up there to you?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the Purple Heart saw and case. This was Saturday's video. So this was made by Rob Cosman, and so it's his dovetail saw. And I made the display case for it. And so we are auctioning off the set. And if you want to bid on that, you can go to woodbywright.com, and I've got a link on the top page. So this is going to charity. We're going to be, all proceeds are going to the Purple Heart Project. There's the word. And you don't know what it is. It's a really, really cool project where Rob Cosman actually brings in wounded vets, people who have had all sorts of crazy, just unbelievable things in service. Like one of the guys was he was involved with, I think it was like 130 unintentional IED explosions. Just absolutely atrocious things. And what they do is they bring in these vets and they teach them woodworking. And not only do they do that, they have an entire week of classes with Rob Cosman. And when they leave, they're left with they're given an entire shop worth of tools, including a bench. And the idea is to help them out through the art of woodworking. And it is just a phenomenal cause. And so all the proceeds go to being able to fly these people in for the class, their time at the class, all of their food and housing, buying the tools and everything that goes along with it. So when they leave, they'll have an entire kit of tools to be able to do woodworking. And it's one of those great things that you can kind of zone out and focus on and leave the cares of the world behind when you're actually in the shop. And it's a great resource. So all of the proceeds for that will be going to it. And it's currently, I think it just hit 2,000. So take a look at that, woodbywright.com, and you can put in your bid on the case. So yes. What's next?
Hang on one second. ZAG Studios, is it better to sharpen card scrapers with a burnisher rather than a stone?
Well, there's a bunch of things to unpack there. There's two different categories to a card scraper. If you get a card scraper with a perfect 90-degree bottom to the sides, it is considered sharpened. And there are some people who like to work with a perfectly 90 degrees card scraper. There are very few, but there are some people who like that. The most common thing is actually to turn a burr on it. And so that is to you actually create a hook, and that hook acts like a plane blade that will carve the wood out. And so to do that, you need to apply pressure with something that's harder in it. You can do that with a file. You can do that with diamond plates, but it is a little bit less intuitive. So all that being said, I do it with a file, diamond plates, and the burnisher. Different steps to get to different places. If I just need a rough burr and I just want to take off material and do it quickly, then I'm just going to use a file to clean it off and to get my hook on there and actually do the card scraping with the file. When I take it to a stone, I am reshaping it because the file has gotten so ragged and bad that I can't re-roll it. I've got to clean it off, take it all down to 90 degrees, and I do that with the stone, and then I use my burnishing rod to actually turn the hook on it. If you want to see videos on that, I've got a pile of them. We did a live about a month ago. We actually brought in someone who was wanting to learn card scraping, and the two of us worked together and actually taught him live, so you guys can follow along with that when I went through pretty much all of that. So yeah, go take a look at that live video. What's next?
Hang on. Apillicus asked, my chip breakers are bent up and don't fully tighten down on the plain iron. Do you have a recommendation on chip breakers? I'm having trouble finding replacements out my way.
Oh, don't replace it, just bend it. Chip breakers are a really soft piece of steel, and you can put them in the vise and bang them around and bend them to whatever shape you need. You actually want to have the chip breaker with a bit of a curve to it. So switch back over to this. So we got the chip breaker here, tip and back, and you want this to actually be humped up. So when it's in the middle here, it's higher than the rest. And so when I set it down on an iron without clamping it down, I slide it into place. It's touching up here at the tip, and it's touching back here, and then in between, there's actually a gap running all the way along there. And so when I crank it down, then it touches at the tip where the screw is at and back here. And that pressure on there is what will hold this all in place. So you do want to have that curve on there. And so to fix it, you take the chip breaker and you put it in your vise and you pound it with a hammer. You don't need a lot of force. It just takes a few tappings and you can bend it down into shape. And so that's what I generally suggest. They're pretty easy to fix. That's one of those things that you generally can't go wrong with a chip breaker unless it's really been trashed. In that case, then yeah, you can buy a new one. There are a bunch of different companies. Hawk makes one, makes them. Veritas makes them. DFM Toolworks, I believe he started selling them now. I've been working with one of his prototypes. I really like his because he has some that have a high angle chip breaker so that they will actually compress the curl a little bit easier. Trying to think. I think Lee Nielsen sells them separately. But yeah, I mean, if I had to go right now and buy one, I would go to DFM Toolworks. If they aren't on sale yet, then I'd go to Hawk. That would be my order, and then probably Lee Valley, and then Lee Nielsen. But along that list, you'd be able to find them. What's next?
Let's see, Peter DeWitt. What is your favorite beginner shop tool build with the goal of outgrowing and no longer needing? My guess is a kerfing plane.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of what tool I would outgrow and no longer need. It would usually be some sort of jig that would hold something in place. A fence for some tool, or a dovetail jig, like the Cat's Moses dovetail jig. This is one of my favorites. Really, really simple jig that holds your saw in place. This is like training wheels for dovetails. Really, really cool thing. I got a link to it on my website if you want to see it, or just go to catsmoses.com. And yeah, this is one of those things that this will teach you dovetails, and you can use this for the rest of your life, or you could outgrow it and be like, I just want to freehand them, depending upon your style and what you do. Kerfing plane, I would put that a little farther down the list. That's not something you use that often, but yeah, you could. I'm trying to think of what else I would outgrow. I don't know, there isn't much, but most of it has to do with jigs to hold things in place or set things up. Because the more you do it, the more you realize you can do it freehand, and freehand is just easier and faster. It's just more skill involved, and so you have to build that skill somehow. But yeah, hope that answers your question. What's next?
Okay, so Ken Carlile has a follow-up about the carcass saw. If I need to adjust the set on that carcass saw, can I do it with just the saw set, or do I need to go through the whole sharpening routine?
No, you can. Well, if you need to decrease the saw set, that is hard. And I wouldn't do that with a saw set because you don't want to bend the tooth back and forth. If you bend the tooth back and forth, well, you know what happens to steel? Eventually it's going to fracture. That's actually pretty common with a lot of with saws. What I would do is take a stone to it, a sharpening stone. If you look up my video, How to Stone a Saw, I cover that on there. And what you're doing is you're basically filing down the side and removing the set on those teeth. And that will make the set much, much smaller. Set is really, really good when you're first getting started. You'll be cutting a larger area, but it allows you to have more control over the saw. You can tip the saw more in the kerf, so you can actually guide it a little bit easier. But the problem with it is it takes a bigger kerf, which means it's going to take more work to push it. You also end up with you don't get quite of a clean cut because it's scratching the surface more. So it's one of those things when you're first getting started, you want a lot of set, and then as you start to learn your skills, then you take away set and use less and less and less. So one of the nice things about saws is the more you use them, the less set you get, because every time you file them down, you remove a little bit of set. And so usually I will sharpen my saws 4 or 5 times, and then I'll reset them. So my set is regularly changing on my saws. But yeah, stoning is the best way to get rid of it. What's next?
Let's see. Kuro asked, what is that long thingy on the file rack? Is it a barbecue sticker?
That long thingy. Oh, my screwdriver. This is a screwdriver. One of the times I was at the MWTCA, I was looking through tools. And if you don't know what the MWTCA, look up what is the MWTCA on YouTube, and you will come across several videos from me. The best place in the world to buy hand tools by far. But I was talking to one particular guy who was selling something. He said, oh, come with me, I've got something for you. And he took me out of the building and out to the parking lot, and he pulled this out of his truck and said, here, I've got this for you. And I said, what is it? And he says, it's a screwdriver. And I'm like, I can see that. What is it for? He said, for turning screws. But this thing is, it's a standard head screwdriver.
It didn't.
But
flip.
it is
Hey.
long. Oops, sorry. Standard head screwdriver. But you can see it's it's long. So I'm sure in some farm, on some implement, this was a required tool for that task to reach that adjustment or screw, but I don't know. I just love the thing. So, yeah, screwdriver. What's next?
Let's see. Alex, I guess, is coming back to a chip breaker question. The problem I'm having is when I tighten it. The gap appears on one side. Before tightening, it was semi-okay. Tried flattening, but still failing. Not sure what I'm doing wrong.
Okay, so it's currently arched, and when you tighten it down, one side comes up and the other side goes down. What I would end up doing is take that chip breaker, put it in a vise, and the side that sticks up high, I'd actually try and twist that side down. So not with the iron, just the chip breaker by itself, and twist the iron. And that might mean that when it's sitting on it, the side that's normally high is the only side that's touching, the other side is up. And then when you crank it down, both sides connect. I would try that first. It is amazing how much you can bend a chip breaker around and bash it back and forth and back and forth. There's really nice, soft, malleable steel. So you can really work it and twist it. And don't be afraid of tweaking on it, because you can come back and tweak it back the other way, and it actually is very, very resilient to that. So yeah, that's probably what I would do, is twist it so that the high point is touching, so that when you crank it down, then both sides are touching. But that'd be my guess. I would have to look at it in person to know if there's some other odd thing to it that's twisting it around. Yeah, I don't know. What's next?
James Crandall wants to know, do you have a chisel test update?
Yes. Let's see. This Saturday is this plane stop. Got this one, which is really kind of cool. I'm not going to show you right now because it's really, really cool. It's actually a plane stop from Reed Tools, which is going to be fun. But then the Saturday after that, which will be, wait, that's going to be Christmas, right?
We're a week and a half. This Saturday, then
Yes.
it's a week from Christmas.
So Christmas, I have a video coming out that's my gift for my Secret Santa, or I'm the Secret Santa for them. And so it'll be New Year's Day. New Year's Day, the chisel test will be coming out. But if you are a patron on Patreon or a member, then I have sent links out to that. If you are a member, you may have missed it because it would disappear in the YouTube feed. But if you are on the Wood by Wright HiveMind Discord server, it's also listed on there for patrons and members. But all the data is finally in. I just have to shoot the video and get it all out. So, yeah, stay tuned. Which, I mean, it was really, really interesting. For those of you who don't know, I did a test 2 years ago with 18 chisels, and I have now upped it to 43 chisels. And there's an immense amount of data. It is a really, really beautiful spreadsheet. One of my favorites. Yeah. It is
Only
the most.
You can say it's a beautiful spreadsheet, and you mean it honestly.
No, it is the most comprehensive chisel test anywhere, on YouTube or anywhere. Not just comprehensive in the number of chisels that are included, but in the data and the amount of different variables that were tested and that have actual numbers on, not just, this feels like a 10. It's really kind of a cool one, so I'm looking forward to putting that out. What's next?
Let's see, Jeremy Long. My wife bought me the same saw that Rob built for the Purple Heart saw. It's my first premium hand saw. What would you suggest for my next one?
Depends on what you have. I'm guessing you would have gotten a dovetail saw, because for some reason that's what people get. The next one should be a carcass saw, which should have been your first, but I'll get off that tirade. Yeah, I mean, a carcass saw is by far the most versatile and useful tool in the shop in my book. Either a carcass saw or a sash saw. A sash saw is just a larger carcass saw, basically. Yeah, that's what I would say is the next one to get. If you're going to be doing a lot of ripping, then a big hand saw. That would be very nice. If you're doing a lot of tenons, maybe getting a tenon saw, then you could still use the dovetail to do the shoulders and then use the tenon to do the cheeks. It kind of just comes down to what are you going to be doing. But if I were to say one saw, the carcass saw. Second would be either the tenon saw or a good hand saw. And I'll actually be talking about that in this Thursday's video. I'm doing, because last week I did a video on what are all the different types of saws, what are they named, and then I'm going to do a whole nother video on what are they all for. Because I had a lot of questions about, which saw should I use for this? So I'll be covering that, and part of that is what order should you buy saws in, and which ones are the most useful. So stay tuned, that'll be out Thursday. What's next?
Let's see. Perez Hernandez asked, I'm having trouble applying shellac to an instrument I'm restoring. What shellac cut do you use, and how do you apply it so it goes on even on the instrument?
Oh, yeah, instrument application you get really, really picky on. And shellac really isn't my favorite. I don't use shellac that much. It's a little bit temperamental. Usually I'm going to apply something really, really thin. I would do like a 1 part shellac to 4 parts thinner to alcohol. Really, really thin it out. Because the thinner you can put it on, the more layers you put on, the more control you have over it. And just understand that you got to have patience with shellac. If you try and build it up too fast, you're going to run into problems. Patience, patience, patience. But yeah, thinner the better. If you buy it from the store, it usually comes pretty thick, and you need to really, really thin it out. When I say the 1 part shellac to 4 parts alcohol, I'm talking about breaking down the store-bought shellac with 4 more parts alcohol. Really, really thin the stuff out. But that's my personal preference. But yeah, I don't do a whole lot with shellac. If you want to see more on that, I'd say take a look at Paul Sellers. He likes that. He uses it quite a bit. He's got a lot of really good tips on that throughout his videos. What's next?
Let's see. Apillicus asked, when are you going to continue the wood screw build videos?
I want to. Let's see, where are those at? I've got this one here. So I did the video on how to carve a screw and how to carve a nut. A lot of fun, but I want to make a video on how to make a screw box. The problem is I decided to make this a double thread. So there's 2 parallel threads running side by side. And that means I need to have 2 cutters. And I'm also making a very, very large cutter. So I'm having a hard time finding the cutters because I could make the cutters for it. I could get like an old triangular file and reforge it, which would be very, very doable. But I'd like to find a place where I could just source the cutters and use those in there. And I haven't found a source that makes that large of a cutter. Tay Tools actually offers them, but they're much smaller. They're designed for like a 1-inch thread as opposed to a 2-inch thread. And that's one of those things I've been wanting to do. It's been on the back burner, and I've had so many other projects I haven't had a chance to really research it and find out. So if someone has a source for larger cutters, 60-degree V-tool cutters, I would love to see that. One of the thoughts I had is buy 2 V-tool chisels and hack the tip off them and use that. Or just have 2 V-tool chisels sticking out the sides. There's lots of little ideas like that I could do. But it's one of those projects where I would love to do it. I have to have more time, and I haven't had that recently. So eventually, but not yet. So sorry. It's coming someday. Someday. What's next? Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just telling everybody that whatever's been asked, I'm hoping we can get through those, and then anything from here on out, we're not going to get to. But they can send you a message and ask their question. So, let's see. Give me one second. Nick Cowart. Will the reed yoke be long enough to support a thick hock chip breaker and iron for a no-name vintage number 3?
Yes. That's one of the things that we wanted to do with the file to fit and the split yoke. They are much, much bigger than they need for any plane out there. And so they can be filed back. So if you have a really thick iron and a really thick chip breaker, it will still stick out another 1/4 inch. So there's a lot of meat on there that will fit any plane. That's one of the big things we wanted to do, is we want to make sure that there was plenty for that. So yes, if you have a modern iron, like the ones from IBC were unbelievably thick, this will still work with those. So yes, that is the big intent for them. What's next?
Let's see. Gigi asked, do you have any experience with polisor or corn straw burnishers? Been going through old lost art press posts and haven't seen a whole lot elsewhere.
I am unfamiliar with the name from the pronunciation I heard. It might be one of those names where if I look at it, it's like, oh yeah, it's pronounced Grblflakov.
I can spell it for you.
That wouldn't help me. I can't see it.
I know. That was why I was just guessing.
Yes, there's a lot of German names that are like, I didn't think that was how it was pronounced.
It looks French, but what do I know?
Yeah, I don't know. One of the nice things about burnishers is it doesn't matter who made it. It's just a hunk of steel. It just has to be harder than the burnisher. And the harder it is, the harder it is from the burnisher, the faster it works. So that's why I generally tell people carbide is the way to go. Other than that, the harder the better. That's the thing. I'd have to look them up and answer you particularly. Though I'm not as familiar with a lot of the brand names for burnishers because I don't pay attention to that. So sorry. What's next?
Jeanluc Desselle asked, what is your opinion on the importance of a folded back on a back saw? Is a slotted back or riveted back that much worse?
If you are a beginning woodworker, folded back is very important, in my opinion. And let me show you why. I bought this saw when I had been hand tool woodworking for about 6 months. Actually, it was a little less than that. It's probably about 4 or 5 months. And I've got, let me see if I can focus on this. There's a big kink right up here. You also see this missing piece where it's broken. And if you have a riveted, like these ones are, they're screwed but riveted, or if you have a slotted where it's glued, then any out of force with your hand, any amount of tweaking you put into it is going to be directly put into the blade, and you're probably going to end up kinking your blade like I did on this one. That can't be fixed. I don't care what you do. I'm never going to be able to get that kink out. I can make it a little better, which I've done over the years, but you're never going to be able to get it out. And so if you have a slotted back or a riveted back, any misforce you put into it is going to hurt your saw. If it's a folded back, then what happens is the saw actually slides out. And all of that force is actually dissipated by the movement of the plate out of the saw or the back off of the saw itself. And you can fix that by then just tapping the back, and it resets the plate down in there. Really, really cool, easy, slick, and smooth. So as a beginner, I say it's very important to have a folded back. But that being said, they're expensive, and there's only a few people who still make them. Go ahead and take it back. Floor tip saws, love his stuff. He is making saws affordable and doing it with a folded back. Really, really liking what he's going with. Lee Nielsen has a folded back. Banach saws, I believe they still have a folded back. And those are really, really good, but you're going to be spending a lot more for them. So if you're beginning, you got to balance that. You may end up being like me and being, I don't have the money for that. I'm going to buy a cheaper one like the Vericist. Works great, but if I use or mess up on it, just realize it's going to go into the blade. So that's my take on it. Once you have a skilled and you're not really tweaking things that much anymore, it honestly doesn't make that big a difference. So that's where I'd put it. What do we got? Time for 1 or 2 more?
All right, I had 5 pulled out, so whenever you want to be done, you tell me. Jack Rector asked, can you carve in end grain, and how do you do it cleanly?
Yeah, sharp iron. The softer your wood is, the sharper the iron has to be. If you're working in a soft pine, that steel has got to be just beyond sharp. You've got to be stopping and stropping every 30, 40 seconds. You've got to keep that tool crazy, crazy sharp if you're working something soft. If you're working something hard like pine, let it go for a while and you're still fine. Pine doesn't crush or bend, and so you can let it get a good bit duller. I'm still going to be stropping every 5 to 10 minutes. But it's the exact same action. Actually, end grain is a little bit easier because you don't have to worry about grain direction quite as much because you're just slicing fibers. But it really comes down to the tool has got to be sharp. But yeah, same motion, same function, just on the end grain. One more.
All right, I'm just going to go to the next one I have. Ken Carlile says, I have a heck of a time freehand sharpening chisels. What kind of guide do you recommend? I have the cheapo ones, but yeah, it's cheapo.
The one I like is the Veritas Mark II. Now, you're going to get this, and it comes with a full set with the narrow and the main and a bunch of other things in there. Or you could get just the standard that has the 90-degree edge on it. All you need is the standard. The narrow is nice if you're doing little chisels, but honestly doesn't help that much over one of these. And I never use my narrow, I just use this one. Even if I were going to be using my tiny chisels, this is the one I would get. I have seen a few Chinese made with the larger wheel on them, and I'd like to try one of them because this is still rather expensive. But if you really want good quality, but still using your hands to function it, that's the one you want. It's just all around phenomenal in my book. But they are pretty pricey. Veritas Mark II. So, yeah, I think that is about it for tonight. Hey, the video actually lasted. That's kind of nice. We didn't die. So next week, hopefully, we will be finishing the video on making dovetails with 2 tools. We're using a hacksaw and a 1/2-inch chisel, and we're making dovetails. I may probably end up just starting over and doing that whole video again because it's a fun one.
If we didn't get to your question, send James a message.
Yep. I think they'll do it. So if you do have any other questions I didn't get to, send me a message. I do answer all those. And yeah, my wife lets me sit up in bed and message people.
Did you just say let?
Yeah.
I've resigned myself. It's sweet. That's why you have such a loyal following, because you really care about people. So.
Well, on that note, we will see you all next week. Until then,
bye.
have a wonderful day.